All right, let's jump right into this explainer on Claire Boyko's absolutely brilliant play, The Book That Saved the Earth. We're exploring a piece of sci-fi today that doesn't rely on epic space battles or, crazy laser shootouts. Instead, it relies on a massive, totally hilarious misunderstanding. It's a perfect example of how context is literally everything. So, how exactly does a single book of nursery rhymes save planet Earth from an alien invasion? Well, that's the core mystery we're unraveling today. We're going to see this hilarious cascade of dramatic irony. That thing where we know exactly what's going on, but the highly advanced alien invaders are just completely and utterly baffled. And it all revolves around one simple, everyday object becoming humanity's ultimate defense mechanism. We actually kick things off way in the future, the 25th century, inside the Museum of Ancient History. There's this character, simply called the Historian, and she sets the stage for us. She points out that back in the 20th century, which she affectionately dubs the era of the book, literature was just incredibly powerful. Books taught people everything. But, as she points out, the absolute strangest thing a book ever did was totally by accident. Section 1. The Era of the Book. Okay, so to really grasp how this whole thing unfolds, we gotta look at the timeline. The key here is that we're looking backwards. We're safe in this peaceful 25th century, looking back at a near-apocalyptic misunderstanding from the year 2040. Earth was totally in the crosshairs of Mars. And the crazy part? Nobody on Earth even knew it was happening, all because a single book stopped the invasion before it officially started. Moving on to Section 2, the Martian Invasion Force. Now, to understand why this invasion failed so spectacularly, we really need to look at the dynamic of the Martian leadership. It's a classic contrast. You have the commander-in-chief, the great and mighty think tank. This guy is incredibly arrogant, needs constant praise, and literally has a giant egg-shaped balloon brain. Then you have his assistant, apprentice Noodle. Noodle is super polite, always bowing, but here's the thing. He's the observant one. He holds all the actual wisdom and is constantly having to correct his boss, but, doing it really delicately so he doesn't bruise Think Tank's massive but fragile ego. And the dramatic irony here is just brilliant. Think Tank sends his manned space probe, Probe 1, down to Earth. The crew, Captain Omega, Lieutenant Iota, and Sergeant Oop, they land in what we instantly recognize as the Centerville Public Library. But here's the catch. These Martians have absolutely zero concept of what a library or a book actually is. They're standing there, surrounded by thousands of them, and they are completely clueless. Which leads us to Section 3, the communication sandwiches. This kicks off a completely hilarious cultural misunderstanding. Think Tank is watching remotely from Mars, trying to deduce what these objects are. First, Sergeant Oob actually tries one on as a hat. Then, Think Tank confidently declares, oh, it's a sandwich, since he knows that's a staple of the Earth diet. But then, thanks to those polite little hints from Noodle, who smooths things over by saying bits of data just floated into his mind, Think Tank's logic evolves in the most absurd way. The sandwich becomes an ear communication device, and finally, an eye communication device. Noodle is just delicately feeding him all the right answers, letting Think Tank take all the credit. But oh man, before they actually figure out it's for reading, imagine the pure absurdity of this moment. Think Tank is absolutely convinced he's looking at a crude refreshment stand. So he literally orders his crew to eat a book. Yes, physically eat it. Poor Sergeant Oob is forced to take a bite, chewing on paper and binding, pretending it's just delicious while he's choking it down without water. He even declares it's as dry as Martian dust. All right, Section 4, Decoding Mother Goose. So once Noodle finally drops the hint that these books are for eye communication, the real panic starts setting in. They open this big, colorful volume, which we immediately know is just a collection of Mother Goose nursery rhymes. But to the Martians, it's just bizarre lines, squiggles, and dots. Think Tank decides this has to be a highly advanced, top-secret Earth code. So, empowered by these chemical intelligence vitamins from their space department, the crew pops the pills, their eyes go wide, and they try to decipher Earth's true threat level. Captain Omega transcribes the very first innocent nursery rhyme back to Mars Space Control. She reads those classic lines about Mistress Mary, quite contrary, and her garden, but she reads it with absolute deadly seriousness. The problem is, Think Tank has zero capacity to understand metaphor or fiction. He takes the rhyme completely literally. He interprets it as absolute proof of Earth's terrifying military might. He actually believes Earthlings have figured out how to combine agriculture and mining to literally grow rare metals like silver right out of the dirt. And even worse, he thinks cockle shells are high explosives that they're just cultivating in their gardens. He immediately tells Noodle to halt the invasion fleet. But wait, it gets better, because the misunderstanding escalates even further with the very next rhyme, read by Lieutenant Iota. It's the classic nonsense poem about a cat, a fiddle, and a cow jumping over the moon. Think Tank goes into a full-blown meltdown. He concludes that Earth has achieved this impossibly terrifying level of civilization. He seriously believes we've taught our domesticated animals musical culture and advanced space techniques. I mean, his logic is, if a cow can jump over the moon, Earth could be launching an interplanetary attack of millions of space cows at this exact moment. This brings us to Section 5, the Great Martian Retreat. This whole chain of wild misinterpretations leads us straight to the climax. Sergeant Opp reads the fateful lines about Humpty Dumpty, the egg that couldn't be put back together again. Crucially, he turns the book around and shows the illustration of Humpty Dumpty right to the camera, so Think Tank can see it on the monitor. Seeing this giant egg-shaped head in the illustration, sitting on a wall and having a great fall, Think Tank just screams in absolute terror. He assumes the book isn't just military intelligence anymore, it's a direct threat. He believes the Earthlings have seen him, the great and mighty balloon brain, and are actively plotting to capture Mars' central control and assassinate him. In sheer utter panic, Think Tank cancels the invasion entirely. Not only does he recall the probe, but he orders the entire Martian population to evacuate the planet. He wants everyone to flee in space capsules 100 million miles away to Alpha Centauri, all just to get as far away from these terrifying Earthlings, their explosive gardens, and their space cows as humanly or Martianly possible. Returning to our historian who's framing the story, she wraps up our explainer by revealing the aftermath. In the centuries that followed, the great and mighty Think Tank was actually replaced by a much wiser ruler, the former apprentice Noodle. And under Noodle's leadership, Mars and Earth eventually resumed contact and became great friends. The Earthlings even taught the Martians the difference between books and sandwiches and built a library right in their capital city. Yet, there is a little lingering trauma. As the historian notes, despite all this new friendship and learning, there is one single book the Martians can never, ever quite bring themselves to read. That dusty old copy of Mother Goose remains an object of profound, deeply ingrained terror for them. So it leaves us with a really fascinating thought to end on today, one about language, context, and the sheer amount of assumptions we bring to the things we read. If beings from another world found your favorite book right now, whether that's a fantasy novel, a cookbook, or a comic book, how might they entirely misinterpret it without our cultural context? What innocent story sitting on your shelf right now could accidentally save the world? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.